Howdy, y'all. Pastor Josh here with our midweek devotion. I'm recording this on Thursday morning. Usually I get them in on Wednesday, but run a little late here this week. So want you to turn in your Bibles to Mark chapter 8, and we will go ahead and read there. So Mark 8, and we'll pick it up at verse 31. And Jesus began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. And he said this plainly. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. But turning and seeing his disciples, Jesus rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul? For whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man also be ashamed when it comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels." And this is God's word. So I want to focus in this passage on this idea. If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. And what do we do with that phrase, deny himself, deny yourself? And I think oftentimes our thought is, well, Jesus is saying be miserable, right? Lose everything that you love, take your little portion of happiness and trample on that and become a martyr. And I think that is that when our brain goes to that place, it's because of the lie that was told to our first parents, Adam and Eve, when God spoke to them and said, "Do not eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil." And then Satan came along and said, "Hey, let me tell you what that means. Let me tell you about that tree. Let me tell you about what you're missing out on." And so that's where we go when we think about denying ourselves, taking up our cross, and following Jesus. What Satan leaves out, though, when he talks to our first parents, and what we leave out when we have that self-talk thing happening in our brains, is that Jesus came to destroy the works of the devil, including the lie that to deny yourself means to be miserable. And so Jesus talks about and shows what self-denial actually means. And this is a rough one for us because we live in a society that very much prizes individualism. And so when we hear deny yourself, we immediately think that we're not going to be ourselves anymore. You're going to take away everything from me that makes me. And so my dreams, my desires, my personality, all those things are going to be gone. And we get that, right? That fear is understandable. Deny yourself does require self-denial, right? Every sin must be slain. Every part of me that does not reflect Christ needs to be renounced, not just once, but daily. Luther talks about this daily dying and rising, daily dying to sin, rising to Christ. And so what Jesus, though, clarifies this. He says, no, find yourself, find your true self. And he goes on to say, whoever would save his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. So the kingdom of heaven tells us the truth about these things, where the serpent can only tell us lies. Jesus reigns. The way up is down. The first are the last. The only way to save yourself is to lose it for his sake. It's this upside-down kingdom idea that the way God's kingdom works is exactly the opposite of every other kingdom that we would think about. And so we deny ourselves, and it gives a better life than the life that we would have otherwise. It's a life where we gain 100-fold more than we ever give up. It's a life where we are no longer broken, but rather we are what God created us to be. It is a life with Jesus, who is the maker of all beauty, who is the redeemer of all brokenness, who is the fountain of all joy. When you deny yourself, you will not lose yourself. You will instead find yourself. It's this whole idea in the Psalms, right? Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. And you can read that passage and think about it as, God's a vending machine, and it just gives me whatever I want. No. What does your heart really desire? See? He will give you the desires of your heart. A heart that is focused on him is a heart that wants nothing more than to draw closer to him. Now, the devil is not in favor of anyone finding himself. And so when we deny ourselves, he will suggest in one way or another that we save ourselves instead. And Peter kind of plays that role in this story, right? Jesus is talking about the cross. He's going to talk about, guys, it's going to get rough soon. And Peter tries to take, he's like, Jesus, do you really want to be telling him all this stuff? And, we've had a rough week. Do we really need to be hearing all of this? But Jesus calls Peter out and says, get behind me, Satan, for thou savorest not the things of God, but rather the things of men. And that's always going to be our temptation, is to turn away from those things that might be difficult, that we might find uncomfortable, that would require us to operate in a different direction and a different way than what we are accustomed to and what would be the path of least resistance. And we have an impulse. We have impulses all the time to indulge ourselves and to do things that will make us happy, that will give us maybe some short-term relief, short-term pleasure, short-term, but it often comes at the expense of long-term character. And so we want to say, there's got to be a more comfortable way to glory, right? Surely we can get the crown without bearing this particular cross that's in my life. And so that's the direction we want to move in. And if you want to delight the devil, then go ahead and refuse to deny yourself. But if you want to fight against the old evil foe, if you want to scorn that person who hates your soul and would like nothing more than for you to be separated from the God of the Bible, then go ahead and leave your cross there. Rather, and what we're called to do is, and Jesus, what do we learn about Jesus? He was rejected by the elders, by the chief priests, by the scribes. He was scoffed at by his neighbors. He was criticized by his family. And you read that in Mark 3 and Mark 6. If we follow him, rejection is something that is going to be a part of our lives. But notice that Jesus puts this in a heavenly perspective. He talks about, we just read, this adulterous and sinful generation. In our sin, that's the company that we keep in our sin. Instead, though, we're called to be in fellowship with the Son of Man, who will one day return in the glory of his Father and the holy angels. He calls us into heaven. And it's always better to be on the right side of heaven than on the right side of history. We use that phrase sometimes. Earthly history, I love history, not my goal. Heavenly history, heavenly future, that's my goal. And so, when we are called to deny ourselves, it can separate us from some people here. It can separate us from some environments, places, interactions, relationships. I think I already said relationships. It can separate us from some of those things here. And you, though, go to the multitudes of the holy angels. You rejoice in the grace that God gives, and you go to Jesus, the Son, who has become closer than a brother and dearer than a friend. And so Elisha writes this in 2 Kings, where we read about him. Do not be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And the one who is with us is greater than the one who is in this world. And we know that to be true. So, one other thing about self-denial. If you deny yourself, you will not only find yourself, you will not only defy the devil, you not only will join heaven's side in this conflict, excuse me, you will be happy. Jonathan Edwards, the great preacher, said, self-denial destroys the very root and foundation of sorrow. All of the world's sorrow, all of the grief, all of the trials, all of the trouble, all of the pain, all of the loneliness. We have those things because our first parents chose self over God, and those things happen in our lives because we, on the reg, choose ourselves over the God of the Bible. If we want to destroy our sorrow down to the bottom, we have to separate ourselves from the love of our sin, and we have to deny our sin and instead embrace the God of the Bible. Jesus knew that he had a mission to destroy all sorrow. He took the whips, he took the nails, he took the cross, he took the crowds, he took the spear, he took the tomb. And when he saw all of those things, how does he describe it? He describes it as glory, as we read a moment ago. And so, and right in Hebrews 12, it tells us, for the joy set before him, he took up his cross. And that's what it was for Jesus, and it can be for us. Deepest joy comes in self-denial, and it's a rich joy, and it's expansive, and it's generous, and it meets us in the midst of our self-denial. And so new life rises as the old life dies. And just as we are sorrowful, always rejoicing, we are self-denying and always rejoicing, 2 Corinthians 6. And so we are called to deny ourselves. Here's what it says, and what Jesus says: leave the safe and small pleasures of a self-protected life for the delights of following the King of heaven. That's him. Darkness, exchange that for light. Take heaven instead of hell. And take the life that he gives, his life of loving him, over the life of indulging yourself in the things of this world. For all the pain that self-denial brings, it is the only path to exceeding joy, because it is the only path to Christ. And so I want you to think about that as we go forward here, finish out the week and finish it strong. Look forward to seeing you guys on Sunday. We do have Holy Communion this week, so look forward to having you back. We do have, we're week 4 of our series on Romans 13, and the big idea is, when is it okay for God's people to practice civil disobedience in the face of times when submitting to the governing authority? Well, when is it not appropriate to do that? It should be not at all controversial. But no, I'm looking forward to preaching that to you guys this Sunday. Looking forward to seeing y'all. So follow me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram. Don't follow me in real life. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Go ahead and ring the bell, and stay frosty, and we'll see you in the next one.